All right, welcome back to the 48th episode of the StartWell Podcast. Once again, I'm Kasim Verji in studio here on King Street West at StartWell, and today joined by a Torontonian that has a very interesting story, one that is hopefully quite nourishing to our listeners, our audience. Excuse the pun. He is a chef and we're going to get into it, entrepreneur.
More like a philanthropic chef, but we can leave it at that.
There you go. I like that. And it's Jagger Gordon from Feed It Forward. Welcome to the studio.
Well, I appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure to have you here. And you are the first, you're not the first food guy to be in the studio. We've had growers, we've had grocers, but we haven't had anyone who handles food in that way and prepares food. So let's backtrack, okay? Like, give me your kind of like quick backstory on how you became a chef.
Right. As a child, I didn't have the structure at home where I had a full fridge or a cupboard full of food. So I relied on going to my neighbor's house where he always had 5 boxes of cereal and things to choose from on a Saturday morning with cartoons that were in color. And so having that opportunity gave me, the excitement. And through my childhood, I moved progressively fast in the ranks from military school and on to find some grounding, as my parents were never around. As I lost my father, then I lost my mother. Having that said, through community I relied on, and being raised in Montreal, then moved to Florida, I got to live through 2 hurricanes, one of them Hugo and Andrew.
Oh, my God.
Losing my whole community to one at a young age, I got to step up to see how community pulls together to let alone give provisions, but food and such. Mm-hmm. So that opened my eyes. And then from moving around the world through different careers, I ended up here in Toronto. And that was when did you move here? 92.
Okay.
And I was on a security contract. So I went to private security, and I was a target for many people around the world. And my ego just followed around with me. And my last contract brought me to Toronto. Met a wonderful woman who was 10 years older than I was, and we had a child together. It didn't work out too well, so I became a single father. Wow. And my daughter, who's now 27 years old, is my best friend. So that's my backstory, And as my daughter was growing up here in Toronto, we ran into the same scenario, but unfortunately we had 5 boxes of cereal in our cupboards, and her friends didn't have it. So one side of the street had the wealth, and the other side of the street didn't. And so one morning I woke up as it was my day off, sending my daughter off to her friend's house to have a little sleepover. I heard a bunch of little giggling girls in my living room at, I think, 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. it'd be. Coming downstairs, I asked, babe, this is my day off. I'm supposed to be sleeping in. Why are you guys here? And she goes, Dad, her friend's name and her 2 sisters, we had a sleepover, and we went into the fridge for breakfast, and there was nothing there. So that's what woke up my story. And my story was I went straight to the school, and I said, if there's any food assistance or programs, let's just open a door and see how we can do this. And then I just said, wow, my passion is food. Like, I always loved to cook. I always entertained with cooking. We cook and we eat every day. So I went to culinary school.
Where'd you go?
I went to George Brown.
Okay.
And then I went to Lias in college. But George Brown was a really special place where I got to meet some great chefs that instructed me at an older age to...
Did they have the restaurant at that point?
Yeah, they just started that down. Okay. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. But having that said, being inspired by these chefs, I just wanted to have a little more sense of traveling with my food. So I went and packed up my bags with my daughter after my culinary school, and we just went staging around the world.
What? That's amazing. Yeah. And so how young was she when you guys hit the road?
Oh, 5.
Yeah, because my daughter's 4.5, so that's about now in my brain. Wow.
Yeah. And
that's fun. That's a fun age.
I got to learn my Indian cuisine. I got to learn my Thai cuisine. Like, I started specializing in unique flavor profiles and bringing my masalas back to Toronto, where I opened up my first catering company. And from there, I started seeing the copious amounts of food being wasted through my company, and I just wanted to do something about it. And so I did my first pop-up in the Trinity Bellwoods, and that was 1994, or 2004, sorry.
2000.
No, excuse me, I'm the
What decade are we in?
Yeah, right. 2014.
Okay.
That's where it all came to light.
Still, is a while ago, like 8 years ago now, which doesn't sound like it makes sense. Right?
This is where the philanthropic part came into being a chef. I start from seeing the waste, and then we did this pop-up on Thanksgiving, and a few hundred people showed up looking for a meal. And then when I saw women and children in hand humbly asking for a meal, I was like, well, I'm not alone in this world with the food waste, and maybe we just need to collectively collaborate and figure out how it can be done. So that's when I just put my thoughts together, and we opened up a pay-what-you-can free restaurant called the Soup Bar at Dundas and Bathurst. That was the beginning of everything. I got to see. This was
out of pocket. Like you rented a space.
Yeah.
You built out the kitchen, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Everything was. You know what? Yes. Everything was done out of pocket, but that's not it. Food was an abundance of waste, and I wanted to utilize it. But what got the message out was the media. Social media, the media picked up on the fact that you're handing out free food. Now, it wasn't just free food, it was rescued food. And that was my new term. Rescuing food and getting the message out, everyone has food that needs to be rescued. And people started coming to me and saying, we have so much for you. And this is where the restaurant came to light. Feeding a few hundred people a day, gave me the inspiration.
This means ingredients or finished food, like people's leftovers?
No, so leftovers, it's something we should talk about. Here in Canada, we have what's called the Good Samaritan's Act 94, which means that if there's any food in good standing, that it can be donated without liability. Having that said, there's a lot of companies out there that says we can't donate our food because of the expiries, the ultimate freshness dates.
Everyone's worried about.
We'll get sued. But that's when I started putting my foot in the door to all the big corporations and saying, wow, there's actually a law that protects you on this. So Whole Foods was my first contributor. Then we went into the bread companies, and then we just moved into farming.
That's pre-expiry food that they were donating, or like day-old bread and all sorts of stuff.
Well, here's the tip of the iceberg on this one. So Whole Foods has a policy that 3 days prior to their optimal freshness date, they destroy everything.
They destroy it?
So if it being a packaged head of lettuce or tomatoes or whatever it be, and if it's 3 days prior to its date, they will destroy it, no matter what it looks like. Now, also, keep in mind, when you have a packaged, a packaged bunch of grapes, and these grapes have one little fuzzy grape in there, they'll destroy the whole package. Or if you have a bag full of tomatoes and one tomato goes amiss, they can't take the tomato out and sell the bag by its weight because it's missing that weight, so they destroy it all. Multiplying that into the farming aspect, the tractor trailer loads that come across the border. If a tractor trailer load was held at the border for an extra day, that means that product probably will be not ready for market, or it has expired itself too before it gets onto market. So that's where we came in to start rescuing the stuff at the Soup Bar. The Soup Bar progressively grew too fast for me from the media aspect. It was just...
like lineups. People were...
That too, but the world wanted to know how to replicate it. So I said, this has to go a little bigger. This is where I saved up enough money out of my own pocket through my catering. As a social enterprise, I opened up the first pay-what-you-can free grocery store. Now, this grocery store rests and lays right now into the Junction, where we feed a few hundred people a day. And it's pretty amazing to walk into a store with dignity and shop and being able to take what you need. If you can't afford it, then we have a point system that we've established. Or if you are socially responsible, you donate what you want to help another. And that's basically 2 of the 13 programs I've created when it comes to food rescue.
2 of the 13 programs? Wow. So as you got digging into this, as a chef also now, once you tooled up your knowledge on kind of like technique and what you can actually do with ingredients, it kind of gets scary when you start looking at how much gets wasted, because there's like potentially so many delicious things that are just like not born, and people eating bad crap, in substitution, because of the way that, like, I would guess the conventional means of feeding people who can't afford to walk into Whole Foods and buy stuff. Wow. Like canned food.
That's right.
And so yeah, there's a million ways you can start getting excited about this stuff.
Well, not to interrupt, but that's where the excitement came with me, knowing that my store is an abundance of organic products where people can just show up and take what they need for a healthier way. Because that theory of the healthy stomach is a healthy mind. Mm-hmm. And just to transition a little further, when I created this soup bar concept, it worked for a year or two, and the scholastic system's looking into it, where we established the soup bar as a brick and mortar into the colleges of Humber. So
cool.
Yeah, and that was really amazing where I started having this class where I was able to teach sustainability to the students and faculty, where people can obtain the following day with the products that we've rescued from the campus into nutritionally balanced meals that fed over a couple hundred people again daily. So there's just this win-win scenario. It's just about sending the message out, being able to describe and talk about the amount of waste that comes from our own homes and from the industry. I mean, 58% of all food that's manufactured here in Canada alone gets destroyed before it gets to market. Now,
and yet we have people going hungry.
That can feed world hunger times 3 annually of the waste that comes from our own country. It's a really sad number. And here in Toronto, we have 1 in 7 families, if not less now, that are struggling with food insecurities. And so we have to figure out how do we tackle this on? Because through Feed It Forward, which is the name of my company, I did all this without funding. I now have over 2,900 volunteers registered in my program that run our own farms, our logistics, our warehousing, our catering operations, our restaurants, our grocery stores, and food manufacturing. So I've obtained great crew members, team leaders that just want to see the purpose come alive and thrive. Mm-hmm. But it's hard as a one-man team.
Oh, yeah.
Because...
Preach on, brother.
But you know what it is? I've
always been a bootstrap kind of entrepreneur. And I mean, there's so many problems with that approach, right? Is that it's tough to allocate cash flow, especially if you're like a highly efficient person who's doing so many jobs in a way, to delegate, relegate, and remove yourself from the process as well as, spend money.
Yeah, I'm too passionately engaged, and that's my problem. And that's what people hold me accountable. Like, it's like they go, why would you do this? And I'm going, well, if I make $2 and I know $1 I can survive off, and I know that one extra dollar, instead of buying something that's very lavish to myself or to someone else that's near me, I could feed maybe 10 people with it. So I've taken that, and I've also stated that not only in my own backyards here in Canada, but the world needs to feel the impact that I can create. Mm-hmm. And that's where I took Feed It Forward around the world, from... I'll give you an example. When we had the Miami-Dade Surfside collapse, when the building collapsed, I took the lead as the executive chef to feed the world crews that came in to assist and all the victims' families and such. And that opened my eyes in devastation, bringing myself back to Florida, knowing that I lived through a hurricane and such, but this was different. This touched me differently because of death, I should say, and people, need that support. But what brought me to the other parts of the world, like Ukraine, where I just recently traveled to, and I was there in the trenches, in the war zones itself.
In the last few months?
Yeah. Well, a few months ago.
Yeah.
And it's because it's been going on for quite some time.
It's crazy, almost a year now.
So I worked with World Central Kitchen with Chef José and
Andrés.
Yeah. Did the Central Kitchen thing. I just felt I needed to do a little more. Because, I'm independent and there's no controlling me.
Right.
So I decided to go from where they were stationed in Poland. I went into the Ukraine itself, and that's when everything changed for me. So I geared up with the whole team. We were all Kevlared up. I was with the medical supply team where we recruited restaurants, and then we started doing provisions and literally finding volunteer drivers, and we put everything together, and we started feeding tens of thousands of people.
In multiple locations?
Right into the war zones.
Okay.
So I technically wasn't supposed to travel into any hot zones, but I pushed my boundaries, and I took unnecessary risks. and I mean unnecessary risk, where we traveled at very different rates of speed of light and Godspeed to get into locations where there are bombardments. Everything's done by infantry. And it's such a coward war, I would say, because it's pushed by a button, by a drone, and it's a faceless war.
Yeah, ordnance coming out of nowhere, and there's people on the ground dying, and they're like, "Wait, no one killed me.
And it's just
a machine killed me."
It's just not even people.
Yeah,
it's children. So I'm in the trenches with these children that are protecting their own villages. They're wearing flip-flops. Now, flip-flops holding a Kalashnikov, and without helmet, without Kevlar, and I'm going, where are your boots? So the analogy of that would be, it's like, oh, well, there's no Canadian Tire down the street, or there's no Mark's Warehouse, right? So the theory that they gave to me, this is a little 17-year-old telling me, well, when I find a dead soldier, I'll take the boots off of him.
Right.
So the best side that I could have done and do is create food and make sure those bellies are warm while they protect their grandparents, because not one man was able to leave that country, and still isn't. So that was just part of the idea of bringing food to different countries. But then I created a free food app, and that's what I brought there, so I could share food around the world. It's like a beacon. It's like the bat signal for where food can be. So if a babushka made a big bowl of borscht and she wanted to share it with her fellow citizens, she would take a picture of it. It would upload and post where it was and when it could be received. And it's a way of communicating in an easy way, I should say, for people to get free food.
So as a user, you post your excess and you say this is available at this location.
Yeah.
And you offer to people to come to get it.
Yeah, even to the point where it would be a harvesting off of a tree that's blooming. So an avocado or mango tree being in Central America, it's in Spanish also, where I brought it there just so people can harvest and share the wealth of the fruits of nectars of Mother Earth.
So in the process of this must have been something you were planning for a while, to look into how to create such an app.
Yeah. It just runs like everything else in my mind continuously. Yeah,
like a good idea that's kind of like you're thinking more on as time goes on, and you find the people that can help you put it together.
Yeah.
And then how did you roll that out, or how is it being rolled out? How are you promoting it?
I'm not.
Okay. So it's organic, like people are discovering.
Yeah, it's organic. Well, I'm just rolling with it because that's where I'm weak at. I'm really good at finding creative ways to utilize food, rescue it, put it back onto the tables of millions of people. I think we're almost at 2 million people that I've served since. And I just don't have the financing or the creativity sense of how to promote it yet. Now, there's a lot of great like-minded people that surround me, but that I could utilize, I guess, but never had the asks. And I guess this is...
Well, it's difficult when you're running, right? To like stop and think of how to kind of build that promotional vehicle and the marketing around things and raising exposure to the issue or the solutions to the issues as well. So hopefully through this episode, there'll be a little bit of kind of, if any of our audience are particularly inspired to get in touch, we'll drop the contacts in the post. But the app's interesting because it's a problem that we've been thinking about for 5 years here. Whenever we have catering on campus, which is now like every single meeting that happens, that's a full day meeting.
Yeah.
The excess is typically going to be 2x what was eaten.
Right.
So you end up with like when you've got a 30-person meeting and you've got like 15 full meals.
That's right.
And the inevitable thing is the host of the meeting is going to be like, take it down if they have any effort, down to our front desk, and our front desk person or our concierge or barista is like, here's a bunch of meals, happy birthday. And they're like, well, someone else just did that 3 minutes ago. I've got so much food to get rid of. And they're always calling around the shelters and stuff. And they're like, we can't take it.
Yeah.
No one will take responsibility for the food. But then how do you distribute it? So this is quite compelling. How's the app working out in Toronto?
Well, it's slowly working. I mean, we utilize it. Whoever takes the initiative to share and that care, make that happen. It's also just not necessarily just sharing the food. It's about eliminating that food waste because, that's great that the receptions or everyone received all that food that was an abundance of or leftovers. But it's like, it is overwhelming. And it's disappointing, too, when you think, a shelter or a food bank can take this, like you're inspired and you're expressing that, what do you mean you can't take it? So that disappointment sets in, and then that leaves little bitter taste in one's mouth because knowing that I have to throw all this food out. So this is where the app comes in, and it gives people that opportunity. Now, when and how it gets popular, well, that's a different story. That's where teamwork comes to make that dream work. So
right, yeah,
it'll happen one day. I just say, or things happen organically, and there's a time and place, such as now, right here, why things happen. And so I guess this is the moment where we discuss it and say, if you're out there and you know anything more than I do, please help.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's super interesting. There's definitely enough people that I'll connect you with after this that can help pick it up in different ways. And definitely people listening and watching to this episode that I think, we have to invite to help promote the use of this app. I mean, this is sort of something that, I don't know, I kind of like, this is a weird brain fart, but for a while I've been kind of very, through the pandemic especially, I've had a number of conversations with people, critically looking at the composure of our digital society in Canada. We're one of the first countries in the world to have almost ubiquitous high-speed internet, right? Going back to the 90s, like the late 90s. By 2000, almost every urban house had access, whether they bought it or not, because of course we have monopolies in telecom, but we had this ridiculous infrastructure for communication. Yet our government hasn't caught on to enable digital services kind of fast enough and quick enough in terms of the social services side of things.
Right.
We really haven't had any, unfortunately, like a digital citizenship program, digital communication that's like representative government, where citizens can kind of interact with each other in a non-commercial Facebook,
right.
Yeah. And something like that would definitely enable this kind of communication of values and the expression of them and the sharing economy like so much more. So it is kind of difficult because if you're doing any social venture to help people in this way, it's almost like you feel sometimes like you're competing against commercial entities for a non-profit way to help people.
Right.
And it's like, I don't have advertising money. And like, why should I compete against someone with anyone really to just help people? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult. That's why it's cool to feature people that are from Toronto that are like particularly, doing local projects, any other project outside of the world, whatever. But serendipity always comes out of these episodes. Mm-hmm. Someone will watch it and be like, and I'm always surprised. Someone will reference something that I said in one of the podcasts and be like, did I say that? I don't remember.
Interesting. So now I'll be analyzing, what did I say or what did I not say? Like, there's so many things I'm sure I would love to say more, but that's, I get you.
I'm really interested in this kind of conviction that you have and how you've communicated it with others that share that conviction to have people not go hungry when they don't have to.
Right.
So are there any particular stories you could tell, maybe even from this recent experience in the Ukraine, of how you were maybe even felt comfortable leaving then and seeing people pick up the mantle?
Wow. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, when I went into Ukraine thinking I was knives blazed, like I was ready to...
We're going to do this.
We're going to start up the kitchens. We're going to get this going. But what I ran into, the reality is every air raid that came about, we had to turn off the gas, turn off the lights, however it be, and go into our shelters. And knowing myself, I'm here, I'm wearing, I was privileged enough to outfit myself with like $13,000 worth of protective gear while my sous chef or my cooks next to me are wearing shorts or just a chemise. Like it blew my mind thinking that here I feel I'm protecting myself, but I can't protect them. Mm-hmm. And of course, everything takes funding because everyone requested, we need help. We need products. We need medical. We need food. And then I'm scratching my own pockets going, how can I do this? And of course, nothing's sustainable. Mm-hmm. I just have this passion and urge to help and create and put it out there. And this is where it came down to with the app and stuff like that, where if I can help one person with something that I've created, then I know I've done my job. Mm-hmm. But how brilliant would it be if I could help 100? So being there, as I fed thousands of people, I really did inspire the locals as I would have done here, I guess, or anywhere else, because they saw the drive from someone who comes from they thought I was representing Canada itself. And it was pretty cool to hear the soldiers, unfortunately, I won't say soldiers, the civilians that were protecting their townships
The whole country's become militarized.
They are.
Out of necessity.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Computer programmers holding up weapons now. Long story short. But, being able to leave and give and create a program through Feed It Forward, it's still initialized there, which is great. It just takes funding. And that's where it really bothers me, because you think, oh, well, people will listen, people will understand. But I never really had the asks. Now, you get to see a lot of these celebrities. You get to see all these great people going in and making their appearances and stuff and doing the clout aspects of things. But my world, it's different. I'd rather just see people put their money where their mouth is and help support programs that are already initialized there, because there are so many civilians and people working hard just to help another. So creating the Feed It Forward program just takes funding out of my pocket for it to continuously go. The hardest part is when you lose a vehicle or when you lose your volunteers to death. And I had to face that reality too.
While you were there?
While I was there and while I've been away.
Wow.
And that's really hard on you, because you think, wow, that could have been me.
Right.
And so having it would have been me. But what do you do? All I'm telling myself is I need to get back down there. I tell myself I had a passion, but I know that I can do more here now.
Sure.
But I tell myself, well, I did so much while I was there because I had the people there with me, and I was able to see where my last meal went, and I was able to be part of it all. And from here, I feel my hands are tied, because logistic-wise, I have a truckload of protein bars and water wipes, which are baby wipes. And I'll give you an example. Imagine being in any little village without running water or electricity, and you have to use the washroom. Toilet paper doesn't grow on trees there. You can't go to a corner. There are no corner stores to buy toilet paper. So they're using whatever they can have to clean themselves without running water.
Yeah.
So what I have now is I have truckloads of these water wipes. I have food and protein bars. I just want to ship down there, but the price of shipping has increased.
Isn't that a crazy thing?
And let alone the pirates.
Right.
And I'll say that very discreetly. And that's why I like going down there to watch my product get where it needs to get, because unfortunately it just never makes it there.
Yeah, corruption.
So when we took our convoys of food to the furthest locations to the borderlines, I think I went through one trip. We drove 18 hours straight back and forth. It was a night mission for us to drop off. And every checkpoint, Ukrainian checkpoint, there were villagers. So they weren't trained, and some of them have been trained previously. But the thing is there's a lot of corruption in that way, where they would take something off that truck. So by the time I get to the end result,
you have to pay your fee to get
I'm
through.
already half full.
Yeah.
Right. So I found a really good way to appease everyone, and that's buy every cigarette available. So I think I had over 100 cartons of cigarettes. I mean, they were $1 a pack, so it was a great deal.
Right.
And I would just
save the food, give the cigarettes.
Just hand off a carton of cigarettes to each checkpoint, and we were good to go. So it was pretty interesting to see that dynamic in a war zone. But leaving from there, what I would only wish is for the app to be utilized further, because it's in Ukrainian and in Polish, and for people just to help each other, because food's not a privilege. It's not. And we seem to make it that way, and especially healthy food.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, the urban reality of kind of any metropole of North America, where people are earning $250,000, a year, and trying out every fancy restaurant that they can go to and spending, without questions asked, $150 on their guest check for one or two people at a table, is the exact opposite of that reality. And the funny thing is, and I wonder how that came up in your travels there, your work there. The funny thing is, I think, before the war, Ukraine was probably enough people were pretty healthy and had access to abundance. Place. Yeah. So it's funny to see how so quickly a place of abundance, and as even a grower community, right? Aren't they the largest single in the region, largest single grower of grain.
Yep.
And overnight.
Yeah. It all changes.
It all changes.
And, you know, for my first time there, I was able to have some form of as a culinary artist, I got to see the food world, and they put such passion into it. These restaurants give you the incredible experience. No, the fun part is, no, I can't say fun part. The exciting part is knowing the passion that's put into it, with the experience of the food and what's plated in front of you and the flavor profiles. But when the air raid comes during the day, morning, or whatever, if you have a little cup of coffee, when that air raid comes, you're just put your food down, you walk into your bunker or whatever it be, or run into it. But when you come back, the gas and everything's turned back on, they fire that same meal right back up for you.
That's crazy.
And
this is like, in Kyiv or like anywhere you went?
Depending on what the martial law was, anywhere. Yeah, pretty much anywhere.
This is what I've been reading about in a lot of news sources, or not news sources, but more like editorialized kind of magazine-y type reportage from the region, is that it is so bizarre that very quickly, almost like it's become normalized.
Oh, it's so normal.
To live with the threat, but not be constantly threatened by it.
That's right. It's so unique to see how the locals have adapted. When an air raid goes off, it's just some just tend not to even bother with it, because if that's their time, the way it was described to me, if it's their time, it's their time.
Right.
It's like, oh man, let's get you a couple more hours or a couple more days.
It's interesting because, I mean, I grew up between East Africa and Canada, right? So in 1992, we moved to Kenya, and I lived under a dictatorship through my early teens.
Oh, wow.
Before moving back here, going to university and all this stuff. And I actually almost went to George Brown. I was applying to chef schools around the world, and I got into the Spear Vineyard Chef School in Stellenbosch, just outside of Cape Town. And I was so going to go there, and I don't know why. Something called me back to Toronto, to George Brown, relatively. I mean, I don't mean to diss George Brown, but it's a far cry from like cooking impala with, you know, ridiculously great wine from 1600s era, you know, old vines. But yeah, I came back here, and then, you know, I worked in a few kitchens, and I decided that it's not the life for me, because I didn't see the creative control from the entry level, and that whole critique of like the restaurant system and working your way up from line cook, you know, to chef was a pain to me. I was like, I'd rather just start a restaurant at some point. And then, you know, it's a bit too arduous for me, even though I'm a mean chef. Like, I cook great stuff. But all that to say, the Kenyan experience, you know, and then when I was there, even as a teen, I filmed some documentaries in various slums, and I saw this sort of duality of life in, you know, in these emerging market countries where you've got, you know, the richest of the rich just on the other side of the fence, right? And this is like a Bombay thing as well. I used to do business in Bombay, and shocking realities. But these are places with this kind of born culture, or at least for the last, you know, I don't know, Kenya, it's a bit new. Slum life is new, but countries that might have 50 or 100 years to kind of grow into this reality. It's so weird to hear of the Ukrainian example being like overnight, this kind of reality hitting people, and that they're getting normalized to the food scarcity, to the being without access to opportunity immediately, to the pausing of life, you know, all this stuff.
And power.
Yeah.
And water.
Yeah.
The main essentials to life being eliminated.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. It's great that you have a little chefy experience behind you on that matter.
Oh, yeah.
That's passion, right? That's where I ran with that passion, because, you know, running through the kitchen hierarchy, like having that regime is what gave me the respect, because as military background, it gave me that ambition to earn my rank, so to say. And as working my way up from the dishwasher all the way to the top as an executive chef, calling myself a creative or a culinary artist now, the plate's my canvas. Yeah. And having that opportunity, I can relate to every single person in this world, because your palate's my business card.
Yeah, not many people talk about this, because there's been this like sensationalization in the culinary world in the last 10 years or let's call it 20 years with the advent of food TV, especially in North America, right? There's this kind of like fetishization of the lifestyle with celebrity chefs in North America, and the end result rather than the process, and the storytelling of the process of the lifestyle of providing food is not necessarily told in mass media that often.
Not much.
So it's really interesting because for every foodie I know, like people who consider themselves, good cooks, I don't see the commitment to that craft, that the professional work requires of you. It's grueling to work in a kitchen.
And, it really is.
And to get past it, you have to learn so many things. Like, and we deal with that here at StartWell, where I look for this kind of experience, hospitality experience, amongst new hires, because that they're going to have a few different tricks up their sleeves, like mindfulness. Mm-hmm. Working in a kitchen, I think, necessitates your ability to be mindful and stay present and be aware. If you get a rush and you're just zoning out, you can't get it out of the door.
That's right.
And you'll get sprayed from the dishwasher, and someone will catch you on fire, and God knows what's going to happen to you. You always have to watch, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the ability to just work under stress as well. And now, whether that's sustainable in kitchens and all this stuff to do with the difficulties of mental fatigue and all that, but working under stress, especially with your military background or that service background, your training.
Yeah, but that's where the strength and the strong will rise, and that's where ACEs will come from. Right now I found it. So we have a kitchen called Blazing Kitchen. This is where most of our catering's coming out of.
Here in Toronto?
Here in Toronto. We primarily do all film and television. So whatever Sylvester Stallone might have had yesterday, would produce the same meal for the person on the street. So the Overture. So we're a zero waste facility, and this is where most of my food comes from for our meal plan programs. But where I'm getting at is the ones that prepare these meals. Since COVID, it's really hard to get that shining ace or that person that wants to actually work. I mean, from the dishwasher, yes, you're going to be doing dishes. But when it comes to the ranks in the kitchen, like I said, nobody wants to get squirt by the dishwasher. Nobody wants to pick up, a pair of tongs if they're using a knife. Like nobody wants to work anymore, and it's really hurting the hospitality industry. And it's just really blowing myself away because back in the day, people were struggling, wanting to get into a kitchen.
Right. Even your experience of staging and going places, convincing people probably you pick up the knife.
I'm a nobody.
Right.
Teach me. And that's where the inspiration came from me, learning everything that I can and surpassing it. And that's where I tell my students and the people that work next to me, alongside me, I want you to grow. I want you to be the best shining little star that you can. But, yeah, it really throws me off to see how things have changed in the workforce. And it's unfortunate, even if you're paying them.
Right. Even if it's a competitive wage. It's so interesting to hear your perspective on this because, as part of our other series gathering, we've been talking to people from all different angles of supporting teams. Some of them are professional recruiters from outside of organization. Some of them are internal recruiters.
Right.
Whether it's technical recruiters recruiting engineers for a software company, or whether it's administration positions, any position of any salary. And this is until we kind of started this series, I hadn't myself done a survey of pay scales in Canada, probably since 2000, I don't know when it was. Oh, it was when I got married. I was looking for a job. 2014. I was an entrepreneur. And then I was like, the startup I had was pretty cool. It was like a Netflix for India before Netflix was in India.
Wow.
And I built the whole thing, went to Bombay to license films, spent every last dime of my other money from my other ventures on it. Did a deal with Virgin. So it was like, there was all this like great stuff in that story, but it ultimately wasn't going anywhere, and I was getting married, and I had no money in my pocket, and I was like, first time ever, I need a job, since my early culinary days, and I got a job working for IBM, which was just like so the opposite of me in many ways, very, very corporate job. But at that point, when I was looking at other jobs, it looked like the kind of glass ceiling in Canada, not long ago, like 10 years ago, was like 120 grand, 140 grand maybe, if you're not a finance guy, with your making money off of money. Mm-hmm. But now it seems to have doubled or more.
Right.
It's shocking.
Less work and more money.
And part of the things that I'm hearing from all of these recruiters and people that we're talking to on the Gathering podcast is that even if the salaries are massive and people are getting signing bonuses, like they're going to pay a recruiter 3 months of salary up front as a commission. The commission is based off of someone sticking around for 6 months in the job. So the recruiter is going to make 3 months. They're also the employer is going to pay 3 months as a commission, and they're going to pay
9 months
6
already
months.
there.
Yeah, and even then, the person signing is looking, especially in engineering jobs in Canada, they're looking for bonuses.
Right.
And a weird thing is we're experiencing so many things, of course, with our labor market, but like for the software guys, they're getting poached by companies all around the world because everyone's woken up to the reality that Canada has a good knowledge sector employee base. So you have like all these recruiting companies that are across the country, but many in Toronto, that are being hired by U.S. firms to hire Canadian talent. Keep them here. Right. They're working remotely. But then they're getting another 3 months of bonus up front as a signing bonus. So people are, I think what I've been hearing is that the surreality of the work versus the recompense, they don't add up. And it's so surreal to even the employees that they're constantly now of a mindset that something better is around the corner. So even if they get a job, they get their bonus. They're getting paid a lot of money.
They think that something's waiting for them.
Something's waiting. And then there's, of course, we've got the side hustle culture emerging. We've got companies like great companies, but they're promoting it thinking that it's like an employee benefit to say, yeah, we'll be cool with you doing something else on the side. And, I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, on that podcast, and I was like, I wouldn't have time to do a side hustle. Mm-hmm. In fact, I had like 3-4 different businesses when I started StartWell, and I killed them all.
Right.
I pulled a plug on a 60,000 subscriber podcast that I was running for my record label, Indian Electronica. I killed the whole server. I let the domain name expire. I said goodbye to that. A big part of my life because I needed to focus.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And that idea of sacrifice in order to focus, right, is maybe that's something that's like people generally don't have. But yeah, it's...
They can learn from that though.
Right.
Right? Especially if a story that you can share.
Yeah. Oh, the many, many stories.
Right. As an entrepreneur, I can only imagine.
The sacrifices.
But, you've triggered a point where discussing in the food industry, and when it comes down to having brick and mortars in restaurants, it's great that I can have my name on restaurants. It's great that you can have that storefront and rely on the foot traffic and your staffing and stuff. And creating a menu that's subjected to what the liking of that audience would be has thrown me off, because I felt that through the pandemic, gave me a whole new way of looking at things, because people want to enjoy it in the experience. Mm-hmm. And going into restaurants, I'm always disappointed. I'm the first guy that walks right into a kitchen and shakes whoever's in charge's hand and take a kneel and say, give me your business card, put something on my plate, give me a reason to come back and make something that I can't make.
Yeah, exactly.
But what it's come down to...
I left my house for this.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to be now dropping double the price.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm going to be dropping $200-$300 a person, but that's with some great wine or whatever it be, give me that whole experience. But now I've changed my model. So speaking of other jobs and side hustles, I created the catering agency where you have the chef's experience. So I come into your home, and I now have an incredible partner, Chef Rob Rainford, who's licensed to grill. He's like the Food Network star.
Okay.
And we both have, we complement each other on two different aspects, and it's wonderful how we work together, but we're able to come into your home, give you that whole experience, bringing the molecular gastronomic techniques, bringing science to food, giving you that whole culinary vision of how your food should be, where it comes from, and the story behind it. But that's what's needed right now. People need to start exploring them within themselves, how to cook. And I'm just bringing all this back into where we're at with this, because people forget how to cook. People are relying on everything's turned takeout, delivery. Get back into the kitchen. Start utilizing and learning where food comes from and how it's going to make your life and happier, and how to be able to share that with your wife or whoever it is. Because cooking, breaking bread at that table is where it all happens, right? And that's how we communicate. It's great that we can sit here solo listening and watching this podcast, but imagine being able to share that with so many other people breaking bread, I should say. But yeah, so the catering agency has been a really wonderful takeoff onto exposing our talents and sharing the excitement through food again, because people have forgotten about it. And I'm noticing all my restaurateurs and people, if you're not well established already, you're not flipping those tables, you're relying on that little machine going off saying, we have a takeout or we have a delivery waiting to be picked up.
So there's two anecdotes actually, and I was remiss to think, and I apologize to if they are listening, but there were two different podcast episodes that we did actually with food people that I forgot about in the beginning when I said we haven't talked to any chefs. So to Len Senator from the Entrepreneur, I apologize.
Len's great.
And of course to the guys from Ascari, Eric and John. Yeah, they were on the podcast a while ago. But both of those are interesting kind of responses. Like Len's whole thing with the Entrepreneur was that it was like he started it as just to get people around food together, right? Yeah. And then of course things got difficult with his landlord, and there was some issues to do with the space.
I know the story,
right? But also I think, leading into the pandemic, it probably was like a big prompt for him to kind of like take a pause and say, hey, wait.
It was time.
Right. And he wanted to write his book, and he wanted to take a pause from all this stuff. And I know he's coming back strong, I think he's in Kerala right now, or Tamil Nadu or something. But like the idea of getting people around the table, and unfortunately the individuality and individualism of the pandemic, I think kind of for some people, kind of push them into a more insular lifestyle, and away from that like common table, familia kind of vibe. Yeah. But for a lot of people, I think there's a renewed interest in like family style and sharing in dinner parties.
There is.
Right? And you're probably seeing that with this catering thing.
Eyes wide open.
Yeah, and people are probably like teach me. Like part of it is like cook for me, but the other is teach me. I want to... We can watch TV and try and copy a recipe, but you being here is like leveling us up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It really excites me too, and especially when you get the youth. When you get the youth sitting in front of you, and that just sort of really inspired, you give them that little technique, you give them the job, and which was technically not supposed to be engaging, but now they're all involved, and now they just want to say, wow, what's next? And that's where recipes are developed.
One of the cool things that came out of the pandemic too, on the Ascari tip, and I worked with them, Eric and John, on this, was early on in the pandemic, they realized that like they were really sad that like the restaurants, the rooms were closed.
Yeah.
They're really sad because everyone in the business knows it's about the experience, right? You really want people the din of the room, and you read the energy of the people as they're eating, and you feel great from that, and you know that you've done a good job, and they're having fun. They missed that, and so very early they started their like dinner kits. So they were kind of like, I think they tried two different models. One was ingredients with the recipe, and the other one was pretty much a pre-cooked, ready to reassemble kind of meal. Maybe you do 1-2 things like bake the bread, but the curry is made. And we worked with them on a couple of videos that were instructional videos. And what I found, which was really interesting, is that the people who watched the videos were more into the videos than assembling the thing. They were like so engaged with the chef showing them how to put it together,
right,
that they didn't want to watch and do it, or do it after watching it. Watching it was enough.
Yeah.
So that was kind of scary to me, because that kind of harkens on this like food as entertainment versus food as an experience thing. And again, it might just be an output of like food TV, Food Network, whatever, sensationalizing.
That's another thing is about Food Network and what's out there in the food world. It seems to be this repetitive, what's safe to put on to screen. And that's where it's blowing my mind, because right now I'm in front of all the networks. I attend Real Screen, and I pitch all these great shows, these concepts, especially Food Rescue Hero, traveling on the world and being able to support and create meals for people that are in devastation or that are in need. And it's really hard for networks to say, oh, well, it's a really edgy, we're so used to everyone watching what competition shows.
Yeah, they're like Anthony Bourdain's dead, man.
But that's the history. That's the part of a chef's life. That's what's entertaining.
Oh, totally.
Right? So
take it to YouTube.
So I'm being told now.
Honestly, it's a tricky thing, because like, you don't want to have to do everything. And that's what the value of the network is support, the creative process with the production and the distribution.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing so much amazing, great content being self-produced because of the same frustration in every industry. And YouTube is going through this transition in terms of its user base and its global reach now. Like what's interesting is, the vlogger culture was started kind of around like New York, and it was let's call it, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, a lot of people doing like selfie videos, essentially sharing their day on camera. And then that spread a little bit throughout North America. A lot of it was around this like consumer culture. So people doing unboxing videos, reviewing their tech that they want for their whatever projects.
Right.
And people watching that because they're thinking of buying the same thing. And then it spread. And YouTube right now, the biggest YouTube user base is in India. And not just passive user base, but active user base. Wow. Like the number of people who are actively vlogging and creating content as serialized content to publish in India is the largest in the whole world.
Never knew. And
their audience as well.
Of course.
So it's very interesting to watch this because it's kind of like a lot of these people are growing up with YouTube as their TV because there was no terrestrial TV network.
That's right.
In India. Mm-hmm. Well, there was, but it was like 3 channels. Like UTV, who we used to work with for my Get Filmy startup, the Netflix of India. UTV, which got bought by Disney, was like channel 2. And there was like 4 channels, eventually. One of them was a state channel. And you could only get it in like one state or something.
Right.
So it's an interesting time, I think, to share these stories online, especially because you've got that global reach, and I think the message is global.
It's really interesting that you're sharing that with me. Thank you. Because, again, as we bring this together, I'm a one-man show thinking of ideas. I film everything I pretty much do for my own vlogging aspects, but I never put it onto...
Never publish it?
No. Not really. I mean, some of it's on my, on my Instagram, Chef Jagger Gordon, and it gets out there, snippets of it. But the idea of sharing a real message is, and sticking to that message is what's key. So it's something where I can learn from, and I will be asking questions.
For sure, we'll help you with that. It was awesome spending some time chatting.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
I think we should definitely do a follow-up session and do like roundtables. And if you're up for participating in this sort of stuff. It was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll have you in to do some food stuff at StartWell. I think some of our audience...
sky's the limit.
Yeah, man.
It really is. Like, there's no limitation here. It's just all a matter of how far we can take our minds together.
Oh, yeah. Wicked, man. Cheers.
Pleasure.